The mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, seemed even larger than it was when silence took over every room. Ryan Miller watched the distant lights of the New York City skyline sparkle from his office window, but his mind was elsewhere, trapped in a labyrinth of thoughts that had been consuming him for nearly 2 years. His reflection in the glass showed a 36-year-old man who looked much older, with deep, dark circles under his eyes and a perpetually weary expression. The impeccable Italian suit couldn't hide the emptiness he carried inside. The sound of soft footsteps in the hallway brought him back to reality. It was Mrs. Davis, the housekeeper who had worked in the house for decades, the same one who had served his parents when they were still alive. She knocked gently on the half-open door before entering. "Mr. Miller, the last candidate is here for the interview," she announced in her ever-gentle voice. But there was something in her tone that Ryan couldn't quite decipher. It was concern, perhaps pity. "How many have left already, Mrs. Davis?" Ryan asked without turning, his eyes fixed on the nightscape. "This is the 13th, sir." The housekeeper paused. "But I have a feeling this one is different." Ryan finally turned, raising an eyebrow. "They were all different, Mrs. Davis. They all promised miracles. And they all quit in less than a month." He walked down the marble staircase, each step echoing in the emptiness of the luxurious house that felt more like a mausoleum. The walls adorned with expensive art, the imported crystal chandeliers, the exclusive designer furniture, none of it filled the void that existed there. Ryan knew the problem wasn't the house, it was him, it was the boy, it was her absence. Megan, the name he avoided saying out loud. His wife, who had departed, leaving not only an impossible void to fill, but also a tiny being that Ryan couldn't look at without his chest tightening. Every time he looked at Michael, his 1-year and 10-month-old son, he saw her eyes, the smile that could have been hers, the life that should have been shared with her. The living room was lit by the soft afternoon light streaming through the enormous windows. Sitting on the beige leather sofa, a young woman waited with her hands clasped in her lap. She stood up when Ryan entered, and he immediately noticed that she really was different. She wasn't wearing the traditional professional uniform the other nannies wore to make a good impression. Instead, she had on simple jeans and a white cotton blouse. Her brown hair was tied back in an unfussy ponytail, and her face, free of heavy makeup, wore an expression of genuine nervousness. "Good afternoon, Mr. Miller. My name is Jenna Smith," she said, extending her hand with a shy smile. "Thank you for the opportunity to interview." Ryan shook her hand, noticing it was the hand of someone who knew hard work, not the manicured hands of the professionals who had come before. "Please have a seat." He picked up the folder with her resume that Mrs. Davis had left on the coffee table. He quickly flipped through the few pages. Jenna Smith, 24, born in a small town in rural Pennsylvania called Promise Creek. Previous experience as an assistant at a community daycare center. No references from high-end homes. No international degrees in child development. Nothing that the specialized agencies usually required. "I see here you have no experience in private residences," Ryan began, keeping his tone professional and distant. "Why did you apply for this position?" Jenna took a deep breath before answering. "Mr. Miller, I know my resume isn't as impressive as the other candidates you must have seen, but I learned from working with kids from low-income communities that each one needs something different. There are no one-size-fits-all formulas, and when Mrs. Davis called me, she told me a little about Michael." She hesitated for a moment. "She told me he's a special child, one who needs someone with patience and dedication." Ryan felt a pang of irritation. Special was too kind an understatement. Michael was a problem child, as the last nanny had. Put it before she quit. He was a child who didn't react, didn't smile, didn't cry, didn't connect. Doctors had ruled out any neurological conditions. Child psychologists suggested it was a deep emotional trauma, possibly related to the absence of his mother and the emotional distance of his father. Ryan knew he was to blame, but he didn't know how to fix it. "Special is an interesting word," Ryan said, his voice laced with a bitterness he couldn't hide. "My son is almost 2 and still doesn't speak. He doesn't interact. He shows no affection. The previous nannies described him as a porcelain doll. Beautiful to look at, but cold and distant. Do you think you're prepared to handle that?" Jenna didn't look away. On the contrary, her brown eyes filled with a quiet determination. "Mr. Miller, children aren't born cold. Children are born needing love, connection, a sense of belonging. If Michael is like this, it's because something has hurt him deeply, and maybe he just needs to find someone who understands that pain." The silence that followed was thick. Ryan felt something shift inside him, a mix of anger and recognition. How dare this small-town girl with no fancy degrees diagnose his son and indirectly accuse him of being the cause of the problem? Before he could respond, a child's cry echoed from upstairs. Not words, just a muffled sob. Mrs. Davis appeared at the living room door, holding Michael in her arms. The boy was dressed in a light blue onesie, his blonde hair tousled, his green eyes fixed on nothing. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Miller, but the little one woke up from his nap and he's agitated," the housekeeper explained. Ryan gestured for her to come in, but something extraordinary happened. The moment Michael saw Jenna, his entire body stiffened. His eyes, normally empty and distant, widened, and then for the first time in his short life he cried. It wasn't a cry of discomfort or a tantrum, it was a deep, visceral, impossible cry of recognition. Before anyone could react, Michael struggled in Mrs. Davis's arms, desperately reaching his little arms out toward Jenna. The young woman stood up instinctively, and Mrs. Davis, stunned by the child's unprecedented reaction, handed him over. Michael clung to Jenna with a strength no one knew he possessed, burying his little face in her neck, and between sobs, he uttered a sound that made Ryan's heart stop. "Mama." It wasn't clear. It was a broken, childish attempt, but it was unmistakable. Michael's first word, and it was that one. Ryan felt his legs go weak. He leaned on the arm of the sofa, unable to process what was happening. Jenna, her eyes filled with tears, rocked the boy gently, whispering words of comfort as he calmed down against her chest. Mrs. Davis brought her hands to her face, overcome with emotion. "How?" Ryan started, but his voice failed him. He cleared his throat and tried again. "How is this possible? He's never ever reacted like this to anyone." Jenna looked at him, and there was something in her face Ryan couldn't name. It wasn't triumph nor surprise. It was a profound sadness, an understanding that went beyond the rational. "Sometimes souls recognize other souls, Mr. Miller. Maybe he senses something in me that he needs. Maybe it's the loss I carry." "You're hired," Ryan said abruptly, surprising himself. "Start tomorrow. Mrs. Davis will prepare a room for you here in the mansion. The salary will be double what was advertised. You'll have weekends off and complete freedom to care for Michael as you see fit." Jenna opened her mouth to speak, probably to negotiate or question, but Ryan was already leaving the room. He needed air, needed to process the impossible thing he had just witnessed. He needed to understand how a complete stranger had managed in seconds what he, the father, hadn't managed in almost 2 years, to provoke an emotional reaction in his son. The first rays of sun streamed through the window of Michael's room when Jenna woke the next morning. She had spent the night in one of the mansion's guest rooms, a suite larger than the entire house she'd grown up in back in Promise Creek. The king-size bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets, the marble bathroom with a jacuzzi tub, it all felt unreal to a girl who had always slept in a twin bed with a lumpy spring mattress. But it wasn't the luxury that occupied her thoughts as she got ready for her first day of work. It was Michael's reaction the day before. That cry, that desperation, that impossible recognition. How could a child who had never seen her before react that way? Jenna knew the answer in her heart, even if her mind tried to dismiss it as absurd. The boy had sensed the loss, the same loss she carried like a constant weight in her chest. Jenna went downstairs at 6 in the morning, as she had arranged with Mrs. Davis. The housekeeper was already in the kitchen making coffee, and the comforting aroma brought a sense of familiarity amidst so much opulence. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Davis greeted her with a warm smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." Jenna hesitated before asking, "Mrs. Davis, about yesterday, what happened with Michael? Was that really a first?" The housekeeper's expression turned serious. Completely. I've worked in this house since Mr. Miller was a boy. I watched him grow up, get married, lose his wife, and shut himself off from the world. And I've seen little Michael since he came home from the hospital. She paused, choosing her words carefully. That boy has never truly cried, never sought comfort, never shown he needed anyone. Until yesterday. What you did was a miracle, child. I didn't do anything, Jenna replied, feeling a tightness in her chest. I was just there. Sometimes that's all we need, someone to just be there. Mrs. Davis poured 2 cups of coffee. Mr. Miller asked for Michael to be woken at 7, but he usually wakes up on his own around then. I've already laid out his clothes in his room. Do you mind starting there? Jenna went back upstairs, this time toward Michael's room. The door was ajar and she peeked in before entering. The room was worthy of a children's design magazine. Walls painted with clouds and birds, light wood furniture, shelves full of expensive toys that looked like they had never been touched. And in the center, in a crib that was already too big for him, was Michael, awake, staring at the ceiling with that characteristic blank expression. "Good morning, Michael," Jenna said softly, approaching slowly. The boy turned his little head toward her, and something extraordinary happened again. His eyes lit up. Not a lot, but enough to show he recognized her. He sat up in his crib and held his little arms out to her, a gesture that melted Jenna's heart. She picked him up, and Michael immediately snuggled against her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Jenna felt tears welling up, but held them back. "Let's get you changed and have some breakfast, okay, little one?" The morning routine flowed with surprising ease. Michael didn't resist when she changed him, didn't fuss when she brushed his hair, didn't turn his face away when she offered him food. On the contrary, he ate with an appetite for the first time in weeks, according to an emotional Mrs. Davis. Ryan watched it all from a distance, hidden in the kitchen doorway. He had come home early from the office where he'd spent the night reviewing contracts, unable to sleep after what he'd witnessed. Seeing his son, interacting, responding, living, was simultaneously the most beautiful and most painful thing he had ever experienced, because it confirmed what he had always known deep down. He wasn't capable of being the father Michael needed. During the morning, Jenna explored the house with Michael in her arms. She showed him the windows, the plants, the paintings. She talked to him constantly, even without getting verbal responses. But there were responses. Michael pointed at things that caught his attention, smiled faintly when she sang softly, touched her face with curiosity. "Do you like music, Mikey?" Jenna asked when they were in the living room. "Let me see if there's a stereo in here." She found a sophisticated sound system but had no idea how to operate it. That's when Ryan finally decided to reveal himself. "I can help with that," he said, entering the room. His voice made Michael flinch slightly against Jenna, and Ryan felt the familiar stab of rejection. Jenna noticed the immediate tension. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. I don't really understand all this new tech." Ryan approached the system, keeping his distance from his son. "What kind of music do you want?" "Something soft, maybe some Carole King," Jenna suggested, stroking Michael's back in a comforting gesture. Ryan selected a playlist, and soon the gentle chords of a classic Carole King song filled the room. He turned to watch Michael's reaction and froze. The boy was relaxed in Jenna's arms, moving his head slightly to the rhythm of the music. His eyes closed in contentment. "He likes it," Jenna said softly, looking at Ryan with an expression of pure compassion. "Maybe you'd like to hold him while the music plays." "He won't want to," Ryan replied, bitterness overflowing. "He never does." "Have you tried? Without expectations, without tension? Just holding him?" Ryan hesitated. He had tried countless times in the first few months, always met with resistance, inconsolable crying, rejection. Eventually, he had stopped trying. But something in Jenna's voice, in the way she encouraged him without judgment, made him want to try one more time. He approached slowly, and Jenna gently positioned Michael to face his father. The boy looked at him with those green eyes so much like Megan's, and Ryan felt the familiar lump in his throat. "Hey, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Michael didn't cry. He didn't struggle. But he didn't surrender either. He remained stiff, tolerating the contact but not accepting it, Ryan held him for a few seconds before handing him back to Jenna, defeated. "It's progress," Jenna said gently. "He didn't reject you. He just needs time." "Time," Ryan repeated bitterly. "It's been almost 2 years. And I've been here for 2 days." She smiled, a sad but hopeful smile. "Rome wasn't built in a day, Mr. Miller. Neither is a family." The word family hit Ryan like a punch. They weren't a family. They were 2 people living in the same house, sharing DNA but completely disconnected. And now there was a third person, a stranger, who in a matter of hours had become the bridge between them. In the following days, a routine was established. Jenna cared for Michael with a dedication that went beyond professional. She didn't just feed and change the boy. She played with him in the garden, showed him the colors of the flowers, sang songs she had learned from her own mother, read stories with funny voices that drew shy little smiles from him. Ryan started coming home earlier, something he hadn't done in years. His meetings were rescheduled, his business. Dinners cancelled. He would make up excuses to pass through the living room where Jenna was with Michael, watching from a distance the interactions he should have been having with his own son. One afternoon, a week after Jenna's arrival, something unusual happened. Michael was playing on the living room rug with building blocks when he saw Ryan walk in. For the first time, he didn't ignore him. He picked up one of the blocks, a red one, and held it out to his father. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. "He's offering you a toy," Jenna explained softly, encouraging Ryan with her eyes. "Take it and play with him." Ryan knelt on the floor, something he had never done before, took the block, and placed it on top of another. Michael watched and, hesitantly, added another block to the makeshift tower. Father and son spent the next 15 minutes building and knocking down towers, and even without words, it was the first real conversation they'd ever had. When Michael finally got tired and went to Jenna for comfort, Ryan remained on the floor looking at his own hands as if he didn't recognize them. Jenna put Michael down for his nap and returned to the living room to find Ryan still there, lost in thought. "Thank you," he said without looking at her, "for not giving up on him. For not giving up on me." Jenna sat on the sofa, maintaining a respectful distance. "Mr. Miller, can I ask you a personal question?" Ryan finally faced her, and she saw in his eyes a deep exhaustion, an old pain. "You can. Have you ever allowed yourself to miss her? Or do you only allow yourself to feel guilt?" The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan wasn't prepared for that question. No one had ever asked him that way, straight to the most painful point. The people around him always walked on eggshells, offering empty condolences or quickly changing the subject. Jenna was different. She looked at him with those brown eyes full of a wisdom that didn't match her 24 years, waiting for an answer he wasn't sure he could give. "I don't know if I understand the difference," he finally answered, his voice low and hoarse. "The guilt and the grief are all mixed up. Every time I look at Michael, I see her. And I see the choice I had to make." He paused, swallowing hard. "Megan had complications during childbirth, a severe hemorrhage. The doctors told me they could only save one of them. I had to choose between my wife and my son." Jenna felt her heart ache, but she remained silent, knowing Ryan needed to say it. "I chose Michael because that's what she would have wanted. She always said she would give her life for our baby. But that doesn't make the choice any less horrific." He covered his face with his hands. "I killed her, Jenna, every time. I look at my son. I remember that she's gone because I decided he would stay." "You didn't kill her," Jenna said firmly. "You made the impossible choice you were forced to make. And you've been punishing yourself for 2 years for something that was never your fault." "How can I not blame myself?" Ryan lifted his face, and she saw tears in his eyes for the first time. "How can I be a father to a child who exists because the woman I loved ceased to exist?" "And how can you punish your son for being born?" Jenna replied, her voice gentle but direct. "Michael feels your rejection, Mr. Miller. He doesn't understand why, but he feels that you blame him. And he's shutting himself off from the world because he believes he doesn't deserve love." The words hit Ryan like stones. "No, I don't blame him. I don't know how to love him without feeling like I'm betraying her memory." "Loving your son isn't betraying anyone. It's honoring the sacrifice she made." Jenna leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, can I tell you something about myself? Something that might explain why Michael reacted to me that way?" Ryan nodded, quickly wiping his eyes, embarrassed to have exposed himself so much. "My mother is sick, very sick," Jenna began, her own voice trembling slightly. "She has a pancreatic tumor. The doctors in Promise Creek said she needs urgent surgery, but her insurance won't cover the specialist and we can't afford the out-of-pocket cost. If we wait for financial aid, she won't survive long enough. The surgery costs $200,000. That's why I came to New York, why I took this job. I'm desperate to save that money." Ryan looked at her with new understanding. "That's why you—" said Michael, "sense the loss you carry." "Exactly," Jenna said with a sad smile. "My mom raised me on her own. My dad left us when I was 3. She worked as a seamstress her whole life, barely making enough to get by, but she never let me go without the essentials: love, care, presence. Now that she needs me, I feel helpless. And that helplessness, that pain of knowing I could lose her at any moment, is something I carry with me every day." "How many months do you think it will take you to save that amount?" Ryan asked, already doing the math in his head. "With the salary you're paying me, about 3 years. If I can get overtime or a second job, maybe 2. Jenna shrugged, trying to hide her desperation. "I pray every day that she can hold on that long." Ryan was silent for a long moment. Then he stood up, went to his office and came back with a checkbook. He wrote something quickly and handed it to Jenna. She looked at the check and turned pale. $200,000. "Mr. Miller, I can't accept this." "You can and you will," Ryan said firmly. "You brought my son back to life in a week. You gave me back the hope that I can become the father he needs. That's priceless." "But this would be charity," Jenna protested, her hands trembling as she held the check. "I don't want you to think I'm here for money, that I told you this story to get a handout. I came to work, honestly. It's not charity, it's gratitude and an investment." Ryan crossed his arms. "If your mother has this surgery, you'll be able to work here without that constant anguish. You'll be able to dedicate yourself completely to Michael, and he needs all of you, not a version of you fragmented by worry." Jenna felt the tears stream freely down her face. "I'll pay back every penny, Mr. Miller. You can deduct it from my salary for as long as it takes. I don't want you to pay it back. I want your mother to be okay, and I want you to continue being this incredible presence in my son's life." Ryan paused. "In our life." There was something in the way he said it, a weight that went beyond professional. Jenna felt a warmth spread across her face. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. You don't know what this means." "I think I do. And please, when we're talking like this, you can call me Ryan." The days that followed brought subtle but significant changes. Jenna brought her mother to New York, where she was admitted to one of the best private hospitals in the city. The surgery was scheduled for the following week, and Jenna divided her time between caring for Michael and visiting the hospital. Ryan began to participate more in his son's routine. He started waking up earlier to have breakfast with Michael and Jenna, something he had never imagined doing. He discovered that his son loved pancakes with syrup, that he giggled when they tickled his belly, that he was afraid of thunder, but loved the rain. One night, as a thunderstorm rolled over Connecticut, Michael woke up scared. Jenna was at the hospital with her mother, and it was Ryan who heard his son's cry for the first time without Mrs. Davis as an intermediary. He entered the room hesitantly, expecting the usual rejection, but Michael, frightened by the thunder, held his little arms out to him. Ryan picked him up, and the boy snuggled against his chest, seeking comfort. "It's okay, son, it's just noise. Daddy's here," he whispered, surprising himself by using that word. "Daddy." He walked around the room, rocking Michael, humming a song Megan used to sing, finally allowing himself to connect the two ends of his life, his son and the wife who was gone. He realized that honoring her memory was exactly this, loving the child she had given him. Michael fell asleep in his arms, and Ryan continued to hold him for hours, sitting in the armchair in the room looking at that serene little face. For the first time in 2 years, He felt something other than guilt. He felt love. When Jenna returned from the hospital the next morning, she found Ryan asleep in the armchair with Michael still in his lap. The scene made her smile through her tears. She took a blanket and covered them both, but the movement woke Ryan. "How's your mom?" he asked, blinking away the sleep. "Good. Anxious about the surgery, but optimistic." Jenna looked at Michael sleeping. "How was the night?" "He was scared of the thunder. He came to me." Ryan smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his face, "and I was able to calm him down. See, I told you it was possible." "Is there anything you don't believe is possible, Jenna?" The question had a playful tone, but Jenna answered seriously. "I used to not believe that someone like me had a place in a world like this." She gestured to the mansion around them. "But Michael taught me that you create a place with presence, not with your origins." "You have more of a place here than you can imagine," Ryan said softly, looking at her in a way that made Jenna's heart race. Before she could answer, Michael stirred, slowly waking up. He opened his little eyes and saw his father, and for the first time there was no tension. There was quiet recognition. Michael touched Ryan's face with his little hand, exploring, getting to know him. "Good morning, little one," Ryan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Michael looked at Jenna and smiled. Then he looked back at Ryan, and it happened. "Dada." The word came out hesitant, broken, but clear. Ryan froze, unable to believe it. Jenna brought her hands to her face, overcome with emotion. "Yes, son, Daddy, that's me." Ryan felt the tears return, but this time they were tears of joy, not pain. Michael repeated more confidently, "Dada." And then, looking at Jenna, he said the other word he already knew, "Mama." Jenna felt her heart break and mend at the same time. "No, sweetie, I'm Jenna." But Michael insisted, pointing at her, "Mama." Ryan and Jenna exchanged a look heavy with unspoken meanings. Something was forming between them, something that went far beyond a professional relationship, something that was both frightening and comforting. The week of Jenna's mother's surgery arrived, bringing with it nervousness and hope. The surgery for Helen, Jenna's mother, was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Jenna had barely slept the night before, torn between anxiety for her mother's health and the strange sense of belonging she had begun to feel in the Miller mansion. In the last few days, the dynamic of the house had completely changed. It was no longer a cold residence inhabited by lonely people. It had become a home. Ryan insisted on going with her to the hospital, bringing Michael along. "This is important for him too," he argued when Jenna tried to protest. "He needs to understand that the people we love sometimes need special care, and you need support." The word love hung in the air between them, charged with a meaning neither of them was ready to fully explore. At the hospital, Helen greeted the visitors with a weak but genuine smile. She was a 52-year-old woman who looked much older, marked by hard work and illness. But her eyes, the same warm brown as Jenna's, lit up when she saw her daughter. "My girl, you look so beautiful. New York is treating you well," Helen said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "It's my job, Mom. I'm being treated very well," Jenna replied, holding back tears. "Mom, this is Mr. Ryan Miller, my boss, and this little one is Michael." Helen looked at Ryan with gratitude. "Mr. Miller, I have no words to thank you for what you've done for my daughter. For me." Ryan, awkward with displays of gratitude, shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. Jenna deserves this, and so much more. She's been essential to my family." Michael, in Ryan's arms, watched Helen with curiosity. The woman held out her hand to him, and the boy surprisingly took it, bringing it to his face in a gesture of affection that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "He's special," Helen commented. "He has an old soul. He can see beyond appearances." "Just like his mother," Jenna murmured, gently stroking Michael's hair. Ryan felt his chest tighten at the mention of Megan, but it was no longer the paralyzing pain of before. It was a gentle longing, a memory that could be honored without destroying him. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Ryan, Jenna, and Michael waited in the waiting room, a strange picture of an unlikely family. Ryan worked on his lapped up while holding Michael with one arm, a skill he had developed in recent days. Jenna paced back and forth, praying softly, unable to sit still. When the surgeon finally appeared, his tired but satisfied face brought immediate relief. The surgery was a success. We were able to remove the entire tumor. She'll have a long recovery, but the prognosis is very good. Jenna collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. Ryan came over and, in a natural gesture, placed his free hand on her shoulder, offering comfort. Michael, sensing Jenna's emotion, reached his little arms out to her, wanting to console her. "It's okay, little one. These are happy tears," Jenna said, taking him into her arms and hugging him tight. "Your grandma is going to be okay." The word grandma did not go unnoticed by Ryan. Jenna was including Michael in her family, just as Michael had already included her in his. The lines between employer and employee, between hired caregiver and family member, were dissolving irreversibly. In the following days, as Helen recovered in the hospital, the routine at the mansion deepened even more. Ryan started coming home for lunch, something unthinkable before. He discovered he loved eating with Jenna and Michael in the kitchen, instead of the formal, solitary dinners he used to have in the dining room. "Jenna, have you ever cooked for yourself here?" Ryan asked one day, watching her prepare Michael's food. "No, sir. I mean, Ryan, Mrs. Davis always prepares the meals. How about we cook together tonight? Something simple, the kind of thing you'd make at home," Ryan suggested, surprising himself with the idea. Jenna looked at him, surprised. "You want me to cook?" "I want us to cook. Together. I can't cook anything besides coffee, but I can learn." And so that night, the mansion's kitchen witnessed an unprecedented scene. Ryan Miller, CEO of one of the country's largest tech companies, peeling potatoes while Jenna prepared a roast chicken with stuffing, a recipe her mother had taught her. "You're peeling too much, you just need to take off the thin skin," Jenna instructed, laughing at Ryan's concentrated expression. "This is harder than closing a $5 million deal," he complained, but he was smiling. Michael was in his high chair, clapping his hands and laughing at their interaction. It was the first time he had seen his father do something so ordinary, so human. While dinner cooked, Ryan and Jenna sat at the kitchen table with Michael between them, sharing a bottle of red wine. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from light topics to deeper ones. "How did you manage to stay so optimistic through everything?" Ryan asked, genuinely curious. "Growing up without a father, with a sick mother, without resources, you could be full of bitterness, but you're the most light-hearted person I've ever met." Jenna thought before answering. "I think my mom taught me that life is a trade-off. You can choose to look at what you've lost or what you still have. I could have been bitter that my dad left us, but I chose to be grateful for a mom who was worth two parents." She paused. "What about you? What was your life like before all this?" Ryan sighed. "Hectic. Empty. I built a business empire, but I had no idea how to build a life. Megan tried to teach me that. She came from a simple family like you. She always said I confused value with price." "She was right," Jenna said softly. "The most valuable things in life are priceless, like this moment, right here. You peeling potatoes, Michael laughing, the smell of a home-cooked meal, you can't buy that." Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time allowing himself to see beyond the hired nanny. He saw a young but wise woman, beautiful in a natural and unpretentious way, with a heart big enough to embrace his and Michael's pain without hesitation, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, an attraction that went beyond the physical, a connection that touched places he thought were dead. "Jenna, he began, but was interrupted by the oven timer. The moment passed, but the tension lingered in the air. The dinner was delicious, better than any five-star restaurant meal Ryan had ever had, because it was made with care, shared with laughter, seasoned with affection. Michael ate everything, getting completely covered in stuffing and loving every minute of it. After putting Michael to bed, Ryan and Jenna met again in the kitchen, washing the dishes together. It was such a simple domestic scene, yet charged with intimacy. "Thank you for today," Ryan said, drying a plate. "It's been a long time since I've felt so normal." "Normal is underrated," Jenna replied, smiling. But it's where life really happens. Ryan put the plate in the cabinet and turned to her. Their hands brushed briefly as she passed him another plate, and it was like an electric shock. They both froze, aware of the proximity, the undeniable chemistry between them. "Jenna," Ryan began again, his voice low and hoarse, "there's something I need to say." But before he could continue, Jenna's phone rang. It was the hospital. Helen had had a minor post-op complication, nothing serious, but they wanted Jenna to come in. "I'll take you," Ryan offered immediately. "Mrs. Davis, can stay with Michael." In the car on the way to the hospital, the silence was thick. Ryan wanted to finish what he had started to say, but he knew it wasn't the right time. Jenna was worried about her mother, and he didn't want to add confusion to her feelings. When they arrived at the hospital and confirmed that Helen was fine, just a small spike in blood pressure that was already under control, Ryan waited outside the room while Jenna talked with her mother. Inside the room, Helen held her daughter's hand and said, "That man looks at you in a special way, my girl." "Mom, it's not like that. He's my boss," Jenna protested, but her cheeks flushed. "And you look at him the same way," Helen smiled faintly. "Don't be afraid to be happy, Jenna. You deserve it." "But we're from different worlds, Mom. He's a millionaire. I'm just a small-town girl." "Love doesn't understand social classes, my child. It understands souls that recognize each other." The following weeks brought a complete transformation to the Greenwich mansion. Helen was discharged from the hospital and at Ryan's invitation stayed in one of the guest rooms to continue her recovery close to her daughter. The presence of the simple but wise woman added a new element of human warmth to the once cold house. Michael loved having a grandma. He would spend hours sitting on Helen's bed while she told him stories of the countryside, of the coffee plantations, of the farm animals where she grew up. The child, who was once silent and withdrawn, now chattered in his toddler speak, making up new words and laughing at his own inventions. Ryan watched it all with a mixture of joy and melancholy. Joy at seeing his son finally living, as a child should. Melancholy for all the months they had lost, for all the time he had wasted on guilt and distance. But Jenna, ever perceptive, knew when these thoughts consumed him. "You're here now," she said one afternoon, finding him standing at the door of Helen's room, watching Michael play with the older woman's hands. "That's what matters. Not the time lost, but the time we still have." "How do you always know what to say?" Ryan asked, turning to her. "Maybe because I carry regrets too," she answered, leading him into the hallway for more privacy. "I spent years in Promise Creek dreaming of having more, of being more. I ignored my mom sometimes, annoyed by our poverty, our limitations. When I found out she was sick, I realized how much time I wasted on shame instead of gratitude. But you were here when she needed you. Just like you're here now for Michael," Jenna smiled. "It's never too late to start over, Ryan." The intimacy between them grew each day. Stolen kisses in the kitchen when no one was looking, glances that lasted longer than necessary, conversations that stretched late into the night after everyone else was asleep. The sexual tension was palpable, but they both hesitated to cross that line. Ryan for fear of taking advantage of his position as her boss, Jenna for fear of not being enough for a man from his world. One night, after a particularly pleasant dinner, where everyone laughed at Helen's stories about the trouble Jenna used to get into as a child, Ryan invited Jenna for a glass of wine on the terrace. Michael and Helen had already gone to bed, and the house was quiet. The terrace offered a spectacular view of the illuminated New York City skyline. Jenna never tired of that view, so different from the starry sky of Promise Creek, but equally beautiful in its own way. "What are you thinking about?" Ryan asked, pouring the wine. "About how strange life is. 2 months ago I was desperate, thinking I was going to lose my mom, not knowing how to go on. Now I'm here in this incredible place, watching her recover, taking care of a child I love as if he were my own." Jenna paused. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out this was all a dream." "It's not a dream," Ryan said, moving closer to her. "It's real, you're real, we're real." "We," Jenna repeated the word as if savoring it. "Is there a we, Ryan?" "I'd like there to be," he confessed, turning to face her completely. "Jenna, I know this complicates everything. I know our relationship started as boss and employee, but it's become so much more than that, at least for me." Jenna's heart pounded. "For me too," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But I'm scared, Ryan. Scared of the differences between us, scared of what people will think, scared of not being enough. For you." Ryan took her hands in his. "You are more than enough. You're everything. You taught me how to be a father. You taught me how to live again. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage." Before Jenna could respond, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft, almost reverent kiss, filled with all the repressed feelings of the past weeks. Jenna responded, melting into the contact that felt both inevitable and perfect. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. "I don't want to ruin this," Jenna said, resting her forehead against his. "I don't want you to wake up tomorrow and regret it." "I will never regret you," Ryan promised, kissing her forehead. "But I understand your fears. Let's take it slow. No pressure, no unrealistic expectations. Just letting this grow naturally." And that's what they did. In the following days, the relationship between Ryan and Jenna evolved into something beautiful and complex. There were stolen kisses in the kitchen, hands intertwined during walks in the park with Michael, whispered conversations on the sofa after everyone was asleep. Helen watched it all with a satisfied smile. She knew her daughter deserved this happiness, and she saw in Ryan a man genuinely transformed by love. But she also knew that happiness never comes without challenges. The challenge arrived on a sunny Thursday afternoon. Jenna was playing with Michael in the garden when her phone rang. It was an unknown number from Promise Creek. When she answered, it was a neighbor with bad news. The small house where her mother lived had suffered severe damage during a storm. The roof had partially collapsed, and the place was uninhabitable. Jenna felt the world spin. That house was all they had. It held the memories of her childhood, her mother's belongings, her history, and now it was destroyed. The repairs would cost at least $50,000, money she didn't have and couldn't ask Ryan for after everything he had already done. She spent the rest of the day trying to hide her anguish, but Ryan knew her too well. During dinner, he noticed how she pushed food around her plate, how she forced smiles, how her eyes were distant. "Jenna, what happened?" he asked when they were alone. She told him about the house, the damage, her worry about how she would handle it. "I don't want to keep asking for help, Ryan. You've already done so much for me, for my mom. I need to handle this myself." "Why by yourself when you can count on me?" Ryan questioned, confused by her resistance. "Because I don't want our relationship to be based on you saving me financially." Jenna fought to maintain her composure. "I don't want to be a charity case. I don't want you to be with me because you feel pity or obligation." Ryan was shocked. "Do you really believe that's how I feel? That all of this," he gestured between them, "is pity?" "I don't know what to believe, Ryan." Jenna finally let the tears fall. "I come from a world where nothing is free, where every bit of help comes with a price. How can I be sure that you want me for who I am, and not out of gratitude for what I did for Michael?" Ryan felt as if he'd been punched. He stood up and began to pace. Then he stopped in front of her and knelt, holding her hands firmly. "Jenna Smith, look at me." He waited until she lifted her tear-stained eyes. "I don't want you. Out of gratitude. I want you because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is seeing your smile. I want you because you turned this empty house into a home. I want you because when I'm with you, I'm the best version of myself." He paused. "And yes, I'm going to fix your house, not because you owe me anything, but because I love you. And I want to take care of you the same way you take care of me and Michael." The declaration hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had used the word love, making everything irreversibly real. "You love me?" Jenna asked, needing to hear it again. "I love you," Ryan repeated without hesitation. Completely, desperately, irreversibly. Jenna pulled him into a hug, sobbing against his shoulder. "I love you too," she confessed. "I'm so scared to love you, but I can't stop." "Then don't stop," he whispered. "Just let it happen." That night, for the first time, Jenna slept in Ryan's arms. They didn't make love, they just held each other, comforting one another, sealing the silent promise that they would face whatever came next together. But the tranquility was short-lived. The next morning, Helen got a call from the hospital in Promise Creek. She needed to go back for some follow-up tests that had been scheduled before her surgery. And with the house damaged, she would need to stay in town for at least a week to find a temporary place to live. Jenna felt panic take over. A week away, a week without seeing Michael, without being near Ryan, without the routine that had become her anchor. The departure of Jenna and Helen happened on a rainy Saturday morning. Michael didn't understand why his Jenna was putting suitcases in the car, why she was crying, why she hugged him so tightly before leaving. When the car finally drove away, the boy stood at the window, watching until it completely disappeared from view. Then he started to cry, a cry different from any Ryan had ever heard. It was pure despair. "It's okay, son. She'll be back soon," Ryan tried to console him, but Michael refused to be touched. He pushed his father away, ran to his room and locked himself under the bed, his favorite hiding spot when he was scared. The hours turned into a nightmare. Michael refused to eat. When Ryan finally managed to get him out from under the bed, the boy was listless, his eyes as empty as they had been in the early days. It was as if all the progress of the last few months had been erased in one morning. Ryan tried everything. He offered Michael's favorite toys, played the music he liked, tried to play the way Jenna did. Nothing worked. The boy was regressing fast, retreating into that shell of silence and distance. On the second day, desperate, Ryan started a video call with Jenna. Michael was sitting on the sofa staring into space. When Jenna's face appeared on the tablet screen, the reaction was instant and devastating. Michael threw himself at the screen, trying to touch her, screaming, "Mama! Mama!" repeatedly. When he realized he couldn't reach her, that she was trapped inside that device, he panicked. He started hitting the screen, crying convulsively, screaming in a way that broke Ryan's heart. "Jenna! Jenna, come back!" The words came out choked between sobs. Jenna, on the other end, was crying with him, unable to help. Ryan ended the call, realizing he was making things worse. He held Michael, who struggled and screamed, until the child finally exhausted himself and passed out from crying. Ryan put him in bed, covered him carefully, and left the room, feeling like the worst father in the world. Mrs. Davis found him sitting in the hallway with his head in his hands. "Mr. Miller, that boy is wasting away. He's not eating, not sleeping right, not playing. He needs Jenna." "I know, Mrs. Davis, I know," Ryan replied, his voice broken. "But she needs to be there to take care of her mother, to sort out the house, just a few more days." But they were days Michael didn't have. On the third day, he stopped reacting completely. He no longer cried, no longer screamed. He just existed, an empty shell. Ryan tried to get him to eat, but the boy spat everything out. He tried to play, but Michael wouldn't look at him. It was as if he had given up. That night, Ryan had a painful and liberating revelation. He couldn't live without Jenna. Michael couldn't live without her. She was no longer the nanny, the employee, the hired caregiver. She was his son's chosen mother, the woman he loved, the person who had turned his house into a home and his existence into a life. Without a second thought, Ryan picked up the phone and cancelled all his meetings for the following week. He packed a bag with Michael's clothes, another with his own, and woke Mrs. Davis in the middle of the night. "I'm going to Promise Creek," he announced. "I don't know when I'll be back. Take care of the house." Mrs. Davis smiled as if she had been waiting for this. "Go get your family, Mr. Miller, and bring them home." Ryan put a still sleepy Michael in his car seat and started driving. It was 5 in the morning on a Monday, and the drive to Promise Creek would take about 6 hours. Michael woke up when they were already on the highway, and upon realizing his father was driving with no apparent destination, he began to whimper. "We're going to see Jenna, son. We're going to get our Jenna," Ryan said, and for the first time in days, he saw a spark of hope in the boy's eyes. The drive seemed endless. Ryan stopped only once for gas and to buy something for Michael to eat. The boy accepted a little juice but refused solid food. His little eyes were fixed on the road, as if he could make Jenna appear by sheer willpower. Finally, in the middle of the afternoon, they arrived in Promise Creek. It was a small, quiet town with cobblestone streets and simple houses. Ryan followed the directions Jenna had given him and found her house, or what was left of it. The roof had indeed collapsed in a significant section, making the place uninhabitable. He parked out front, and before he could get out, the front door opened. Helen appeared, leaning on a cane, her eyes wide with surprise. Behind her, Jenna emerged, and upon seeing Ryan's car, she froze. Ryan got out and opened the back door. Michael, seeing Jenna, started screaming and struggling in his car seat. "Jenna! Jenna! Mama!" Jenna ran, her eyes full of tears, and practically pulled Michael from the car seat. The boy clung to her with desperate strength, burying his face in her neck, sobbing. "Mama! Mama! Mama!" he repeated like a mantra. "I'm here, my love. I'm here," Jenna whispered, kissing the boy's face, rocking him, consoling him. Ryan watched the scene, his own face wet with tears. Helen approached him and placed a hand on his arm. "You came to get your family, Mr. Miller?" "I did," he confirmed, looking at Jenna. "I can't live without her, Helen. Michael can't live without her. She's become essential to us." "And you've become essential to her," Helen said softly. "She cries every night, missing you both." When Michael finally calmed down, Jenna approached Ryan. "Why did you come?" "Because I realized something," Ryan began, pulling her closer, with Michael still in her arms between them. "I realized that help isn't charity when it comes from love. I realized that taking care of the ones we love doesn't create debts, it creates bonds. And I realized I don't want to spend another day without you." He looked at Helen. "Helen, I'm going to rebuild your house. I'll make it even better than it was. But I want you to come live with us in Connecticut. You, Jenna, and Michael. You're my family now, the only family that matters." Jenna covered her mouth with her free hand, unable to speak. Helen smiled through her own tears. "Mr. Miller, I don't know if my daughter is ready to accept all of this." "I am," Jenna finally found her voice. "I'm ready." She looked at Ryan, her brown eyes shining with love and determination. "Because I learned from you that accepting love isn't weakness, it's courage. And I love you too much to let pride keep me away from you." Ryan kissed her right there, in front of the ruined house, under the approving gaze of Helen and the curious little eyes of Michael. It was a kiss that sealed promises, healed wounds, and built bridges between two worlds that had seemed impossible to unite. But there was something more Ryan needed to say. He pulled back, took a deep breath, and knelt right there on the cobblestone street of Promise Creek. He held Jenna's hand with one of his, the other supporting Michael. "Jenna Smith," he began, his voice firm despite the emotion. "You came into my life as a hired nanny and became so much more. You became the mother my son chose. You became the woman who taught me to love again. You became the reason I wake up every day wanting to be a better man." He paused, wiping away tears. "I don't have a ring right now, but I have my heart, and it's yours completely. Will you marry me? Not to be my employee, not just to be Michael's mother, but to be my partner, my equal, my wife." Jenna knelt in front of him, placing Michael between them. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. 1,000 times yes. Michael, sensing it was a special moment, touched both their faces with his little hands. "Dada," he said clearly, touching Ryan. Then he turned to Jenna. "Mama." And for the first time, without confusion, without doubt, he looked at them both together and said, "Family." Ryan and Jenna hugged with Michael between them, the three pieces that fit perfectly to form a complete whole. Helen watched from the porch, leaning on her cane, smiling through tears of joy. The drive back to Connecticut was completely different from the trip there. Michael ate, played, and laughed. Jenna and Ryan talked about the future, making plans. They would marry in a simple ceremony, with only the people who truly mattered. Helen would live with them in the mansion. The house in Promise Creek would be rebuilt and rented out, providing an income for Helen to have her independence. When they arrived in Greenwich, it was already night. Mrs. Davis was waiting for them with a special dinner, as if she knew they would return transformed. The house, which Ryan had always seen as a luxurious prison, now shone with the lights on. ready to welcome its true family. That night, after putting Michael to bed, Ryan and Jenna stood in the kitchen, the place where everything had started to change between them. He pulled her into his arms and they danced without music, just swayed by the love they felt for each other. "You know what's funny?" Jenna said, resting her head on his chest. "I spent my whole life thinking I needed money to be happy, to give my mom a better life, to have security. But I learned that you can't buy happiness. You find it in the right people." "You taught me that," Ryan replied, kissing the top of her head. "You taught me that a house only becomes a home when there's love inside it." From Michael's room, they heard a small noise. They went to check and found the boy sitting up in his crib, looking at the door as if he were waiting for them. When he saw them together, he smiled that smile that completely transformed his little face. Ryan picked him up, and Jenna moved closer. The three of them stood there, embraced, a perfect picture of redemption and new beginnings. Michael touched his father's face and said, with more clarity than ever, "Daddy." Then he touched Jenna's face. "Mommy." They were no longer childish attempts or confused sounds. They were words full of meaning, of recognition, of love. Ryan felt as if a circle had finally closed. Megan had given her life so Michael could be born, and now Michael had given Ryan a new life by bringing Jenna into theirs. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a transformation. It was an honor. It was love in its purest form. Jenna looked at Ryan, her eyes shining. "We're a real family now." "We always were," Ryan answered. "We just needed to accept it." And there, in the soft light of Michael's room, in the mansion that was no longer cold but a home, three hearts were definitively united. A father who had learned to love without guilt, a woman who had learned to accept love without fear, and a child who had finally found the family he always deserved. 6 months later, Ryan and Jenna were married in the mansion's garden. It was a small ceremony with only Mrs. Davis, Helen, and a few close friends. Michael was the ring bearer, carrying the rings on a small cushion with the seriousness of someone who understands the importance of the moment. When the officiant asked if Ryan took Jenna to be his wife, he answered while looking not only at her but also at Michael. "I do. Forever." And when he asked Jenna, she smiled, took Ryan's hand and Michael's, joining the three of them. "I do. With all my heart." The kiss that sealed their union was interrupted by Michael shouting, "Kiss! Kiss!" and clapping his hands, making everyone laugh. That night, after the guests had left and Michael was fast asleep in his room, Ryan and Jenna stood on the terrace, looking at the stars. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied, turning to face him. "Who would have thought a job interview would completely change my life? Who would have thought hiring a nanny would give me a wife and turn my son into a happy child?" Ryan laughed. "I think the universe knew what it was doing when it brought you to us." "Or maybe," Jenna suggested, smiling, "souls really do recognize each other. Michael recognized me that first day because he knew I was who he and you needed. And I recognized in you the family I had always dreamed of." Ryan kissed her softly, knowing she was right. Some connections don't need a logical explanation, they just are, like the love they felt for each other, like the transformation they had lived through together, like the family they had built not on blood, but on the daily choice to love, to care, and to stay. And as the lights of New York City sparkled in the distance and the peaceful silence of the night enveloped them, Ryan realized he was finally at peace. With the past, with the present, and with the future, he would build alongside Jenna and Michael, his family, his redemption, his love. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ryan, Jenna, and Michael has touched your hearts deeply. This is a narrative about second chances, about how love can heal the deepest wounds, and about how family is defined not just by blood, but by choice and dedication. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support motivates us to bring you unique daily stories that explore the complexities of life, love, and human relationships. Share in the comments what you felt as you followed this family's transformation. Your opinion is very important to us. We'll see you in the next videos with more stories that will make you believe in the transformative power of love.